Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my channel / podcast. This is Movies and Stuff, and this is the number 1's. Pretty much, we're here to look at some first episodes of classic television from throughout the years. You know, when I was a kid, a lot of these shows ran quite often and in syndication, some of them which I might have seen in prime time at the time. Of course, not going back as far as this particular one. But a lot of times I saw episodes here and there, but I never saw the original episode. The episode that set it up, the episode that established the world in which these characters live in. And so with the power of many of these particular channels I'm looking at, the Roku channel, Tubi TV, Crackle TV, and so on and so forth, I decided to go back and take a look at some of these, catch it from the first episode, if you will, and see what it is that I missed. Did it do a good job? Did it make sense? Did it age well? This is what we're going to find out. And the first one that I'm going to do is Bewitched. Why Bewitched? I have no idea. But it just happened to be the one that when I turned on my Roku channel, it was right there in my face. And I said, hey, why not? Why not go back to Bewitched, which was pretty much at the forefront of fantasy TV of the mid-'60s. It's kind of helmed the Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, the Addams Family, the Munsters, and those, of course, are the big ones. And then we had the ones that, nobody really remembers, or at least they didn't go very far. It's About Time. I think that, It's About Time with Joe E. Ross. A lot of people remember his Gunther Tootie from Car 54, Where Are You? Basically, the premise of that show being some astronauts that go back in time, and now they're living with a cave-dwelling family, and then it goes into reverse for some reason. It just happens that way. But again, it's fantasy TV, man. So, that took place. And then, shows like My Mother the Car took place around this time. A lot of people got on Jerry Van Dyke for accepting that role, saying this is ridiculous. Why would you take that when they offered you Gilligan's Island? But, let's look at for what it was. I know it's easy to take a shot at him for making a quote bad decision, but in hindsight, that's what was on there at the time. I mean, is this concept of this guy riding around in a car that happens to house his mother's spirit any more ridiculous than a man marrying a witch, or somebody finding a genie on a beach, or a family that's full of the Frankenstein monster, a vampire, a wolf? Is it really any more ridiculous than any of this stuff? And I know that's completely off topic, but let's get back on the topic of it. First episode, we're talking Bewitched here. Season 1, episode 1, Darren, Take This Witch, Samantha, or I, Darren, Take This Witch, Samantha is the title of the episode, which pretty much sets up as follows. You have Darren, who is the lead male. We all know him. And we're talking about Dick York, the original Darren also, before he was later replaced by Dick Sargent due to health complications, mainly stemming from his back and being unable to just take the rigors of doing long tapings and whatnot. Elizabeth Montgomery, of course, as Samantha Stevens. Agnes Moorehead makes an appearance as an Endora. But here we have Samantha and Darren, who at the beginning of this episode are bumping into each other quite literally on more than one occasion. They kind of squeeze into the door to a building together. They bump each other at a store. They bump each other again at the store. And then it basically goes on to explain that they decided, they should sit down and talk. This is all being introduced to us by the narrator of the show, which I'm not even sure if they even used the narrator again following this. So, that in and of itself is kind of interesting in this pilot, that for the first time and maybe the only time in the series that we have a narration that's going on here. As this goes on, he is talking us through their courtship, their meeting, and we see them kissing each other in the living room, in the car, in a boat, and just on and on to establish the affection and attraction that these two have for each other. They move on to marriage, and now we start to set the table for what Bewitched is all about. Darren at this point has no idea that his wife is a witch. And Dora pops into the bedroom. Of course, Darren is in the other side. We're going to assume that this is the honeymoon suite. We know it's in a hotel, which comes into play later. But we see that the honeymoon suite is there. Samantha, I guess she's Stevens at that point. She's waiting with bated breath for her husband to come in and sweep her off her feet. But her mother pops in, literally, and is telling her, okay, it's time to go. She assumes that Darren initially is a witch himself and that Samantha must be under a spell, and the reason why she didn't want to leave, she's like, well, I'll take care of that. But Samantha tells her, no, he's not a witch. He's just a regular man, and I love him, and so on and so forth. And Dora does not want to leave. She is trying to talk Samantha out of it. The interesting part about this is that I'm not sure if this is an allegory for maybe tensions or prejudices of the time, and they use fantasy TV to kind of illustrate that. It is not unheard of. We've seen it happen a couple of times, and we actually saw it happen a few times later on in the Bewitched series, where I think it's the famous episode where Samantha's daughter wants to be more like her friend who's black, and she somehow casts a spell, and they both get polka dots that shade them the opposite person or the opposite color. So so this very well at this stage during this conversation between Samantha and her disapproving mother could be used as an analogy for some of the prejudices that were going on at the time, and really still do, with her having married a human. And she starts up with us like, well, they're prejudiced. She actually used those terms. They're prejudiced. He's gonna assume that you work one day a year as a witch, wear a black hat, and ride a broom or whatever the case may be. Meanwhile, every time Darren tries to make effort to go into the bedroom after he takes a swig of champagne, and Dora poofs him down to the lobby. And he has no idea how he got there, other than the fact that he's like, the champagne must be strong, which I'll admit was a pretty funny joke in the delivery and how he did it. He gets another key, goes back upstairs, tries it again, boom, she sends him back down. He has to get another key. Of course, now this is happening over the course of this conversation that Samantha's having with her mother. She basically now says that, that she's refusing to leave. Samantha tries to use magic on her to make her leave. Can't do it. Don't explain why, but she can't do it. I'm assuming that Endora's just too powerful or whatever. But she does decide to go on her own accord when she says that she being Samantha, she will tell her husband herself that I am indeed a witch. Which that was enough for Endora, like, okay, well, once you do that, you'll be home before supper or whatever. So she disappears. So now we pick it up. Samantha opens the door. Darren comes in, and this third effort to try to get into the bedroom. And now he's happy because he sees his beautiful wife waiting for him in her bedroom attire, at least such as it is for the time. And she immediately goes and says, we have to talk. Now she's laying out the whole, I am a witch. He doesn't believe it. Of course, he has no reason to believe it. She hasn't done anything to make him believe it up until he starts to try to smoke, which again, sign of the times here. Because we don't see too many people just haphazardly lighting up cigarettes these days, or at least, not for a primary character in a sitcom. Tries to light the cigarette. The lighter that's left in the hotel room, again, sign of the times. There was lighters there just as a convenience. Doesn't work. Samantha makes it work. She also makes the ashtray slide towards him. She also, when he gets up to say he needs some air, makes the window pop open. When he feels a little faint, well, I think I skipped one. He says, I can use a drink. She makes a drink pop in his hand. Then he asks for a specific drink. She makes that one pop in his hand, which was an old fashioned, and a straw. So she's doing all these things in succession after he went through this whole song and dance of like, sure, you're a witch, and my aunt's a lighthouse, or something along those lines. They played it up, they built it for a little bit, as she's telling, as she was telling him before all these things, like, well, I'm not very good. I can only do little things. And that sets the table for her to do all of these little things that she's doing to make him believe in what she is and who she is and what she does. She pulls a chair over to him just, magically, so that when he's getting ready to sit down, it's right behind him. And so now he has come to terms with the idea that he has married a witch. Goes into the second segment of the show where he's telling friends, his doctor. Of course, none of them take this as a literal statement. They either do one or two things. The first friend doesn't even listen to what he's saying. I mean, he's carrying on at the bar saying, I married a witch, and this dude is just steadily talking about what you need to do with your marriage, even though the opening joke, which also I thought was fine or funny, is that he was like, hey, I know all about marriage, which is why I'm a bachelor. That dude didn't pay any attention to him, basically walks out on him after he finished rambling. Darren goes to the doctor. He gets prescribed, you need to take a vacation. They take him back to the bar, or we cut back to the bar. Darren's sitting there and he says it to his bartender. And of course, the bartender doesn't take that as a literal statement. Because Darren just saying it. He's like, I married a witch. He's like, well, look, you should see mines. So, ha ha ha. We got our jokes in for what this is and what she's doing, and, what Darren is trying to accept, which ultimately he does, as we all know. Otherwise, the show wouldn't go on. But all of those instances, all of those things set the table for how they met, why she decided to tell him, because she also felt like, hey, marriages shouldn't have any secrets, and his acceptance of such. And also, this is where we get the entire premise of the series. The entire premise of the series is laid out right here in this moment when he says, I love you and I'm not going to give you up that easy. But, you got to learn how to do things the normal way. You got to be a regular housewife and blah, blah, blah. I have no idea why Darren decided that he marries his witch, that he didn't want her to use her powers whatsoever. Now, admirable as that may be, because I'm sure had that taken place in anybody else's lifetime, in reality, they probably would have tried to exploit it as much as possible. But this character here, Darren, doesn't want to do that. He wants her to be a normal housewife. Again, here's another sign of the time moment. Basically, stay home, cook, clean, do what I tell you to do. So, which is funny, in and of itself when you're looking at it through the lens of 2020 as I'm recording this. It's almost 2021. But it is another certain sign of the times, as it is with almost everything else that you have to do. The presentation / mentality of within the show. And so she agrees. She agrees that, yeah, I'll do that, because I love you, and I want to make you happy, and I'll do all the things that you want from a wife. And it races off, and we know the comedy ensues from there, because we know damn well that Samantha cannot not use her powers. And the first instance of which is Darren is at work. And I'm assuming this takes place after commercial break, because you remember I am watching this on the Roku channel, which is available right now, by the way. So he's at his job at the advertising firm, and an ex-girlfriend or fiance, we assume, pops in on him. She just walks in unannounced. Sheila shows up, and oh, Darren, blah, 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 I'm sorry I left you, and this, that, and the other. Invites him to a party. Invites him and his new wife, because she already knows that he's been married. And she comes in giving him congratulations, which we all find out at this point was just gaga. She didn't care. She was setting this whole thing up for the purposes of being the recognized, excuse the impression if any kids watch it, but the recognized bitch of the show. She invites Darren, basically downplays what the party is going to be that she's inviting him at. It's like, come on by, it's just potluck dinner. We all just sitting around, just kind of on the floor thing. No big deal. We cut to Darren now bringing his wife, his newlywed wife, to this party with him. And she's basically in a house dress and a sweater. They open the door at what appears to be a large townhome or / mansion, and look inside, and everybody's dressed up. They're in suits. His ex-girlfriend Sheila's in this nice dress with jewelry hanging off, and so immediately we see that Samantha feels underdressed, and now Sheila is doing the subtle bitch stuff. Oh, you look like you could pull that off, and I wish I could do regular stuff like that, and just that low key kind of insulting. This is played by Nancy Kovac, and she played this role to the tilt. She did a fantastic job being the bitchy ex-girlfriend. This is the part of the show that I didn't quite get, beyond the fact that you have to fill in your imagination. So we get past that, and we go to the dinner scene. The dinner scene essentially has Darren sitting next to his ex-girlfriend at the head of the table. For some reason or another, Samantha's on the opposite end of this table. And in my mind, as I'm watching this, I was like, well, why didn't he sit with her? For what good reason did Darren and his new wife allow themselves to be separated like that? I mean, I can't, other than the fact that Sheila was kind of bossy and she, may have, quote, bullied him into it, like over-talked him and, oh, yeah, Darren, you just come sit with, something like that. I can't imagine why, even without powers, they would allow this to happen. Why he would just go along with that? Why he wouldn't say, hey, can you trade with me? Because there's other people at the table. It's got to be at least like, I don't know, 7 people there at a minimum, maybe 6 or 7. And you would think that somebody there would be like, yeah, I'll trade with you, but that didn't happen. Of course, I mean, I guess it didn't work for the show, but I would believe that whether she was sitting next to him or whether she was sitting across from the table at the end, the jokes would still work. So we go into the jokes. That was just my little observation there. We move on. We go into the jokes. The jokes here being is that Sheila is now doing everything in her power to either belittle or work over Darren to try to, assumably try to win him back or prove her superiority over Samantha, being that I dress better, I have this, that, and the other. And don't you remember when we were in the Hamptons and, just bringing up old stuff that clearly in her mind, Samantha cannot compete with. She being Sheila, the ex-girlfriend, probably goads Samantha one too many times. And now Samantha's sitting at the end of the table talking to herself saying, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Yeah, okay, maybe a little bit. So and there we go. There lies the premise of the show. What situation is Samantha going to get herself in or be placed in that is going to make her backtrack her promise? Because the promise is established in this show, episode 1, as we're talking about right now. The show ran, 7 seasons, I think, something along those lines, if I'm not mistaken. It ran a long time. It is considered the 8 seasons. It was the longest running fantasy TV show of that era. So in any case, she backtracks on her promise, and now it breaks loose. And the other thing I noticed within this episode is that the trademark wiggle of the nose was not the sole way that she introduced her powers. Now, I was not a big Bewitched follower in that I've watched every episode, so that might have happened more than once. But nominally speaking, anybody that's even vaguely familiar with the show Bewitched, And of course, based on the movie that came out later, we have basically come to understand that the show uses Samantha and the nose twitch as a way to establish her powers. Here, it was a little bit different. The nose twitch was part of that, but she, almost anything that she was trying to get done to her rival here, she did something on herself that kind of caused it to happen on Sheila. In other words, she took out her hair, Sheila's hair flipped forward. She tapped her tooth, all of a sudden Sheila has like spinach wrapped around her tooth that she wasn't aware of. She blows at the candle and wind comes. Just little things like wipes her hand in front of her and then Sheila's plate moves over to the left. Things like that. And in fact, at one point, you would think that a 12-year-old boy had these superpowers at one point, because not only does she the hair, and all of this is happening while she was trying to entertain / talk to Darren. Her perfect, and they set that up like, oh, Sheila has perfect hair. Her perfect hair gets flipped forward. Her teeth has spinach in it. All of a sudden, she gets ready to rest her elbow on the table. Her bowl of soup moves over to intercept the elbow. Her maid comes in with an empty tray to take stuff away. All of a sudden, it's got food on it that gets dumped onto Sheila. The back of her dress gets zipped down for whatever. I have no idea why Samantha would want to do that. Again, when I saw that, I was like, who's doing this? Like a kid? I mean, that seems like something that a horny teenager would do. Let me zip off your dress. And I'm really surprised that actually, for the time, maybe I'm wrong, I'm really surprised that even, made air, for that matter, I mean, even if it was her back. I mean, we're talking about the same era where you couldn't even have, a married couple sleeping in the same bed. So them showing skin in this of any sort was a little bit surprising to me. Sheila gets up. She's frantic. The food's been dumped on her. Elbow's been in soup. Her hair's out of place, and this, that, and the other. Her bracelet falls off. Darren says, he looks at his wife. I'm just taking her bracelet, which was mistake number one. I don't know why he decided to do that. It's her house. It's not like she wasn't going to get it back. He goes over to her, go by the front door, gives her a bracelet, and tries to help her out some. But as soon as he turns to do that, an imaginary kick in the butt happens, which we know happens from Samantha. The door opens up and like this hurricane goes shooting in. And Sheila's wig comes off. So now we know why she's got her perfect hair. She runs upstairs. Everybody at the table is looking and surprised and, oh, what's going on? What's happening here? Except for, of course, Samantha, who's sitting there calmly eating her soup. She magically closes the door, once Sheila is out of the picture. And then once Darren comes back in, all kind of getting himself together, Samantha makes the comment, oh, yeah, the soup is good. I really have to get the recipe from it. Gives that little smirk, and then we move on. So again, the whole purpose of this scene and what's going on is to establish the backtrack of the promise that she made earlier in the show. Hence, establishing what this entire show is going to be week by week, episode by episode, is that we're going to try for Samantha not to use her powers, but ultimately she's going to use her powers. Cut to the end scene where they're back at home, Samantha and Darren saying, look, I'm not saying that you didn't have any right to do, be upset or do what you did, but you can't be doing that all the time. Again, I don't get it. I don't understand. Darren should have just sat his ass at that table, let Sheila get what she had coming to her, and moved on about his day. Didn't do that, but, he was still trying to be the man. He was still trying to be the man of his household. Darren was a little, horny little something there, too, because he was trying to get Samantha, he was trying to have his cake and eat it, too, so to speak. They come back in, they walk into the kitchen. The kitchen's a mess by TV standards, at least. And she's saying, oh, I got to get this kitchen clean. And he's not really letting her do that. He's kissing her and so on and so forth. Like, come with me. And She's like, well, I still got to get this clean. And she's like, well, you can do it tomorrow. She's like, well, you told me that last night. Of course, we know what they're alluding to there. So we got Darren. He walks off. He's like, okay, I'll be waiting. She promises again, or at least hints at she's going to do it herself. But the second he's out of the room and she looks at the kitchen, she walks through it, sees all the stuff laid out. She's like, oh, well, whatever. Raises her arms and poof, everything's up and the kitchen's immaculate and clean and so on and so forth. And she makes that last statement, well, maybe I'll just taper off, opposed to just stopping cold turkey. And there we have it. Bewitched episode 1, which was a fun little episode. It's interesting to go back and look at some of these shows and with the 2020 lens. I don't mean the year 2020. I just mean hindsight being 2020. Going back and looking at some of these shows and seeing them as they were and, what aged well and what didn't. One of the things I thought that aged well were the jokes, surprisingly. The jokes and the premise of the show aged pretty well. It didn't feel outdated in that it is a simple concept to get. A mortal human being marries a witch unknowingly, but he still loves her. The thing that didn't age well in there was the idea that he was going to try to get her to just be the housewife. Like if that show was to take place today, if they were going to do a Bewitched now, heaven forbid that they do. Please do not. I know I just spoke it into the universe, but this does not need to happen. But if it were, if the show were to take place in today's environment, she would probably be an executive somewhere or something like that. She certainly wouldn't just be the average housewife, or at least not the housewife under the premise of that's what I'm supposed to do. She might be the housewife because she wants to be, but certainly not because I was told to do it. Here she was more or less told, hey, you can't be doing that. Even though he is in no position to be telling her what to and what she can't do. The ex-girlfriend, that aged very well. Everybody can understand that some things in TV and comedy and entertainment just are timeless. The girlfriend or the rich girlfriend here, or the well-to-do girlfriend who sees the lower class counterpart, is something that everybody can understand, whether they have gone through it or not. And it was so easy just to take and watch. And she made the Sheila character, she being Nancy Kovac, she made that Sheila character very easy to dislike. I mean, you wanted her to get her comeuppance. By the time she sat down at that table and started up with Samantha, you were ready for her to get what she had coming to her. And it worked. So those things really kind of played well. They ran well. They worked. The only thing that you're kind of missing here, of course, is the technology of the time. And if you overlook the technology of the time, and they really didn't use all that much. It's not like they was talking about a brand new thing like called a TV. They didn't do a lot of that. And matter of fact, a lot of the stuff that was in the background was incidental. This is all character driven. So the episode in and of itself, I can't say every episode following this, but episode 1, season 1 of Bewitched really ages very well. And if you haven't had a chance to watch it and you're curious about what I'm saying, it is available right now on the Roku channel. I think about 3 seasons worth of Bewitched is there right now. So if you have never seen the show, if you were just curious about it like I was, now's the time. In fact, about 4 seasons. And keep in mind, back then, seasons were long. They were long. I think, you talk about seasons worth like 30 plus episodes every season. Nowadays, you can get a season off of 8 episodes, which this show has a ton of episodes. Certainly not going to go through all of these. I'm just going back to see this, and it was done. It was so well done. And it is one of those concepts of television It moved at a reasonable pace. I mean, the only thing that kind of threw me, and I can't even say threw me off, was they colorized the episode that I am watching. I'm sure that there's a black and white version of it somewhere, but they colorized this particular episode. And, it didn't seem as natural as it should be, but that's a very small thing to be, complaining about. So, long story short there, if you got the time and you got the inclination, and if you listen to this, clearly you must enjoy classic television. Go take a look at it. It's available. It's for free. And I don't even think they ran any commercials in the middle of me watching it. So it was all good. And that's it, folks. That is the episode number 1 of Bewitched. I, Darren, take this witch Samantha, which was a pretty reasonable episode. So thank you for tuning in. Check out the next one. We're going to find another number 1, and we're going to review that. And we will catch you guys the next go round. Peace.